Hot Water History, episode 124, Wednesday night. Gary, what's going on?
Well, I'm wearing my Memphis Redbirds hat. It has musical notes on it because of the history of the connection of
It's a cool
music in
logo.
Memphis.
Cool
It was,
logo.
yeah, it was about a year ago that we were in Memphis having a great time. With none of that good time had anything to do with Freedom Fest. So, except for the makeshift sort of impromptu session we had with Robbie and TK, which was fun at Freedom Fest. But otherwise, it was at the end of that session where I said, no more of this Skousen faux Freedom Fest um, waste of time. So I think you concurred at that point.
It's interesting where we're at now.
Right. We're with the Delling poll. We're not with CIA Mark Skousen and his weird wife and family. And the cohort of weirdos who are, well, make part of their lives Freedom Fest. It's a lot of weird Mormonism going on there too. So anyway, well, at least you got 2 years ago when it was in Vegas, you got to see one of the greatest movies of all time as part of the
I don't know what you're talking about.
Liberty and Film.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Uh, maybe one time you'll share that with the audience. What a wonderful, what was that? Loved in the time of COVID. What was it called?
I don't remember.
I bailed on Charlie about a quarter of the way through. We were doing it as a favor to people who were nice to us too. And ooh, I couldn't get out of there faster.
Yeah, that wasn't a good movie.
Yeah. But at least we had a good time in Vegas and we had a great time in Memphis. And we'll look for possible other freedom-loving venues in New Hampshire, perhaps, in Virginia, perhaps,
No,
in
no, I'm not,
Anarchapulco.
no,
You want to go to
no,
Anarchapulco in Mexico?
no.
You don't want to go anywhere. You just want to be living free in an unfree world, right in Chicagoland.
Yeah, there's no conference. I don't know. Maybe it's wrong to give up on all conferences for this stuff,
Even
but
Porkfest? Even you're giving up on Porkfest? The possibility of Porkfest. Really?
I think it's just another shiny object that's gonna disappoint
Oh,
us.
wow. Okay.
I
Even
could
though
be wrong though.
we've received assurances from Bernarda and Scott Scheller that it's quite good.
Yeah, I mean you can go. You can go. But man,
Charlie in absentia.
we've been in this for what? Since what, 2021? Summer 2021 is the first time we went to a Freedom Fest.
Yes.
We were dealing with Joe Jorgensen at the time.
Yeah. She had already lost. She was licking her proverbial wounds.
And Dave Smith was there.
He was the MC.
Oh yeah. Wow. He
Yeah.
would never MC ever again.
I would think not. I would think not.
I mean, how could he? It's two separate people. It's two separate groups of people.
Yeah. And I don't know, nor does Christine Nome probably know if that was before or after she killed her dog.
Wait, what?
You know, about the her famous story about she just released an autobiography and she talks about how she had to put down a dog that was disobedient and she just shot him. Yeah. And she got a lot of flack for it, obviously, because, people don't like the idea of you just shooting dogs wantonly or because they're relatively disobedient. And given that you're a governor of a state, what would you do if people were disobedient to
Yeah.
you? But on top of that, I think was it Candace Owens or no, it was Lauren Chen. Lauren Chen had a great line about, well, subsequent to the whole dog killing story, she even went on Fox News and one of the hosts on Fox Business was grilling her about the dog. And she's like, I'm not talking about that. It was Stuart Varney. Stuart, I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about the dog. He goes, well, I have to ask you, you know? And then following that, it came out, she went on Meet the Press, and I think Margaret Brennan asked, who, by the way, I think is actually quite hot. She's terrible as a person, but I think Margaret Brennan is actually quite hot. Look her up. For everyone, like the vast majority of the country who doesn't watch Meet the Press or anything on NBC, particularly news driven. But Margaret Brennan asked her about this episode she included in the autobiography about meeting Kim Jong Un, and it, it was later determined, and they got it. Christy Nome never met Kim Jong
So
Un.
okay, so I've seen this.
Yes, you saw the clip where
I've
she
seen
just
the
has to say,
clip.
"Well, it was an error in the book, and we're trying to retract it."
I've seen that. I didn't know about the
Yes.
dog.
Oh, the dog was preceding that. Was preceding that. So yeah. So back to Lauren Chen and her genius. She wrote after it was published about the never meeting Kim Jong Un and having to retract it. She goes, "This is the worst book tour ever." So she can't. She ended up canceling her book tour, and I'm sure no one except even her family members, including her estranged husband, probably bought it. I suspect that maybe Corey Lewandowski is leading the charge of buying his mistress's book. So there you go. Oh, the beauty of the modern GOP.
We got psyoped. I got psyoped.
How so?
It's so weird because you think these are awesome people for not doing the lockdown. Like Kristi Noem, I remember thinking was like awesome because South Dakota didn't go into lockdown.
Correct. That being said, again, we have a very low standard for awesome now.
Well, that's the thing. It
Not
just shows
putting
how
people in
low.
cages in their own homes is all of a sudden, of the 49 others or 48 others, excluding DeSantis, who followed the protocols of the megalomaniac sociopath Fauci and Birx. Um, so so she defied them in her little hamlet of a state. I mean, no offense to South Dakotans. I love South Dakota, but it's very
Yeah,
small.
easy on
Yeah,
SD.
I just gave the caveat, okay? Or the corollary there, instruction. So anyway, yeah, I mean, in her little corner of the world, she was very bold. And remember what she said during the speech at Freedom Fest is, I had no power whatsoever to determine who's an essential worker and who's a non-essential worker.
I remember
As if
that.
that should even be a question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just by stating that that was a legitimate question to be answered shows you the depths of the depravity of the COVID scare pandemic.
Yeah, our standards are so low now.
Immensely, I shouldn't say immensely, they're just hellishly low.
Ron DeSantis, same category.
Yes,
Trump
right.
now coming back around. The amount of Republicans that are cool with Donald Trump not saying he's going to pardon Julian Assange is crazy.
Well, he didn't say he's not pardoning him, he's considering him.
Yeah, I guess, but couldn't he have already done this?
He should have done it, according to accounts that I've read, is that he was going to pardon Assange and Snowden in the waning days of his first administration. And then that ghoul lizard person, Mike Pompeo, as head of the CIA. You know, remember Trump has this tendency to listen to the last person who was in his ear. And Pompeo excoriated him and pled with him and just begged him not to. And he ended up not doing it, which is really a bitch move if ever, that you listen to Mike Pompeo of all people. What has Mike Pompeo gotten right, either in domestic or foreign policy? Nothing. And
Yeah.
just as is the want of government, he just keeps getting promoted either through appointment or election, doesn't really matter, to ever increasing authoritative and prominent offices, such as the nature of government, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here we are.
Mm.
It's 2024 now.
been that way for a while now.
Yeah, but we were talking about 2023, 2022,
Ah, I see. Yes.
summer of
Yeah.
2024.
Ah, I
We're
see.
in a
You're
different
giving
summer.
perspective. Perspective. Hmm.
Dave Smith isn't running for president. It
He
turns
elected not
out.
to.
It turns out.
Yeah.
And we ended up, I shouldn't even say we, but the Libertarian Party ended up with someone much worse.
Isn't it amazing that we're in 2024 and we have the same dilemma? It's kind of a semantic problem wherein we used to say we are, and even libertarians and caps like us, we slip. Even Dave Smith slips. Tom Woods slips. When we speak of we use this general we, and what they're truly referring to is the federal government or the U.S. policy apparatus, a foreign policy apparatus, or the deep state. We say we, uh, especially when we're considering the dastardly and destructive things that have been done, particularly since 1999 and the fall of the Soviet Union back in 1991, to really exacerbate and strain and alter what could have been a glorious non-interventionist moment in global and American history, right? We have this problem in which we identify we did that to Russia or we did that. Of course, we have to constantly differentiate that it's the lizard people and monsters and demoniacs in government that perpetuated those crimes against the world and then turned, as Dave so articulately points out, uh, with so much backing and evidence, turned that war of terror and war of espionage, war of information gathering, and vitiation of the Bill of Rights onto American citizens through the Patriot Act, through the TSA, through um, through the NSA and all the secret spy services that are going on, monitoring and destroying anything from the first through the second, through the fourth, through the eighth, you name it, amendments within the Bill of Rights. So, but my point being here is that just like when we conflate and use interchangeably the we regarding Americans or anything having to do with America, we have to really be much more careful. And I think in part our show tonight is going to be a bit of introspection about when we use the general or global we pertaining to libertarianism and specifically the Libertarian Party. And why is
So,
that, Charlie? Why should we why are we spending our time with this?
because it's confusing now. We can't, to a normie, they're going to say, oh, wait, or to people who don't really listen to us that much, they might say, oh, I thought you were libertarians. So isn't this your guy? This
Yes.
Chase Oliver guy.
And
And
is it not awkward now because we have this series of weak, feckless, non-libertarian, libertarian candidates? Has there ever been in the history of humanity a political movement, an ideological framework, and one that's so pro human and pro prosperity and in favor of understanding history in such a way so as to be informed about the liberating principles of free market laissez-faire economics, the Austrian School of Economics, notions of the non-aggression principle, all of these immensely beautiful ideas, these wonderful edifices to truth and beauty and goodness and true charity to be expressed toward your neighbor and your fellow man. And yet the functioning of it, the actual practicalities, including the fact that it can't form an effective party apparatus so as to transmit, convey, and then instantiate and put into effect these ideas that are truly liberating? Has there ever been such an immense disconnect? I don't know. I don't know.
Now it's like the uniparty's a three-party system.
True. Well, I, there was a tweet someone had posted that on my timeline today. Did you do that?
I
That
don't
we're
think
all
so.
in. It's really the three. I suspect it was actually Jeffrey Tucker of the Brownstone Institute that put that. We're not in the duopoly. We're in the triopoly
Yeah.
now. So let's give people who aren't familiar with the inside baseball of libertarianism and Libertarian Party politics what transpired over the weekend. Of course, we had the Libertarian National Convention of all places in Washington, D.C., the belly of the beast, going into the lion's den. And the Mises Caucus, which had successfully taken over the party. And what we mean by the takeover is precisely what Dave Smith and Angela McCardle and Michael Heise had done in forming the caucus, the Mises Caucus within the Libertarian Party, to take it over so that the candidates and nominees and the inner functioning of the party would be so directed and so realigned so as to promote actual libertarian principles, concepts, notions, and ideas. And then win, or at the very least, disseminate authentic libertarianism through the selecting of truly, I suppose, authentic libertarians. That's not to say that there couldn't be divergences or there couldn't be differences of minor opinion, but on the core notions, anti-war, pro-peace, pro-free markets, against aggression, if there were questions about the policies or the type of white or black papers that ought to be developed pertaining to such things as the border, education, immigration, what have you, then those could be met out. Those could be argued in either closed door sessions or open door. And the preferred medium would be in open, perhaps even live YouTube sessions. That would be very much open and shared with the public, particularly
Yeah.
those individuals who would be interested in such matters. But I have to say that in the course of the 2017, when the Mises takeover took place, actually the takeover took place maybe a couple years after in 2019, but the Mises Caucus was formed in 2017. I mean, there's the mouthpiece, I suppose the megaphone of, and this is just the nature of American politics as it exists today. We can blame Theodore Roosevelt all we want for the imperial presidency, but people are focused on who is the standard bearer for libertarian messaging. Naturally, people interested in alternative or third party candidates look to the Libertarian Party. There's, I mean, in recent polling, about 10% of the country identifies with libertarian ideas. So that's a significant segment of the population. And yet the party can only garner 1.5, 2, 3%, right? Of the popular vote. In any case, the nature of it is such that the presidential nominee has about a 6-month period, once nominated, to be the megaphone and mouthpiece of libertarianism and its conveyance of the ideologies, notions, principles, concepts to the United States and the American people. And what the Libertarian Party did through a variety of idiocy, an admixture of idiocy, weird autism, and sinister motives or sinister actions, because they nominated Chase. What's his name again? I just had my
Oliver.
blank. Chase Oliver, and as a vice presidential candidate in a in a move that resembles the corrupt bargain of 1824, um, Mike Termott, who's, by the way, Chase Oliver, flamboyantly gay man, and not really a libertarian, certainly not a principled one. And we'll take a look at what his positions are that have really set off and alienated and enervated much of those libertarians who, like Charlie and myself, would like the party to represent actual libertarianism rather than these pet causes. And then Mike Termott, who's his vice president, who negotiated his way into that position as the not vice presidential nominee, who's an ex-cop who engaged in, as we know now, warrantless searches against against Mexican citizens, Mexican American citizens living in the country. So these guys, it's, and we'll talk later about the dilemma that both libertarians and Catholics find themselves in as we transition to our next topic of interest. But um, it's just a sad state of affairs. So should we bring up the list of positions that Jeremy Kaufman and others who are vocal libertarians and figures, big figures in the libertarian movement and party, have as points of contention with Chase Oliver?
Yeah, why do they decide so late, the president or nominee?
They had to go through 6 votes
Yeah,
because no
why?
one got a majority of the vote. And basically, the system, as I can ascertain it, functions is that you have to go through various rounds, and then each round, until someone gets a majority or something along those lines of the vote, the lowest vote getter gets kicked off the ballot. So Joshua Smith got kicked off the ballot relatively early. And I like some of what Joshua Smith says. Joshua Smith's certainly much more an authentic libertarian than Chase Oliver in this Mike Tremont joke, Joker. But so for those of you unaware of what Chase Oliver stands for, and I've looked and done some back research to confirm that what Jeremy is asserting here is indeed true, and I can verify that it is because of his very public advocacy of these various causes. That is to say, Chase Oliver's advocacy of them. Here's a list. Jeremy Coppett says here in a tweet, foolish autistic libertarians think politics is only about policy. There are some problems with Chase's policies, but the biggest problem is that he's a leftist, and his leftism is why he sides with the drag queen over the family. And there are famous pictures circulating of him, not just in pictures with drag queens, but also contending that one of his tweets from, I believe it was 2021 and 2022, is that any parent shouldn't be concerned about a male drag queen desiring to go to the restroom with their daughters. Okay. And then we have all these episodes that are then replies to such inanity of girls being abused sexually and in school bathrooms, you name it, assaulted, you name it, because of this insane transgenderism and the advocacy for the LGBTQ plus TYZ whatever. So he has that. Oh, and then he just talks at some length about how there's nothing to fear from Drag Queen Story Hour being sponsored by even public institutions. He sides with this is B. He sides with the drug addict criminal over the cop. Okay. Unless the cop's Mike Tremont. He wants to invite low IQ Gazans into America. So it's for Chase Oliver, he's been very open about the United States should be bringing in refugees from foreign wars without vetting them or anything like that. He's an open borders guy, so he's at least consistent in this way. And the consistency lies in, if anyone wants to come into the country, well, then they ought to be able to do so. Not a very popular opinion with the American people. We can debate whether it's libertarian or not, or ANCAP for that matter. He sides, this is Jeremy again, he sides with the bum over the working man. He believes every single hate crime hoax, even the Matthew Shepard one. Do you remember Matthew Shepard?
No.
Okay, so about 20 years ago, the whole Matthew Shepard saga was all the rage. Matthew Shepard was a homosexual man who was assaulted and supposedly killed because he was beaten to death in Wyoming for being gay. And this was all the rage. Notice you don't hear about Matthew Shepard anymore because if you investigate it a little bit further, it was just a story made up so as to vilify anyone who was against gay rights and gay equality.
So he didn't even exist. He
Oh
wasn't a
no,
real.
he existed, and I think he was murdered, but the story and the narrative as it built up and snowballed
Sure.
was later very easily proven to be false and just sort of gay reverse hagiography. So we could take a look at that. Maybe we should do an episode on that hoax. He will march with communists. He will march with race communists. He will support neutering kids. Now, about the supporting neutering kids, Oliver's been very upfront about how there should be no impingement or restriction on anyone who, even minors, who want to take hormone blockers and sex transitional drugs and narcotics, so long as it's not invasive. Now, invasive, of course, to a left libertarian just means you have to cut the person. You have to cut their genitals off. That's what invasive is. Or add genitals in the case of female to male transition, whatever. Okay. That would be invasive. Otherwise, any of the drugs that, by the way, essentially lead you down the same path of transitioning, well, that's not invasive. I guess narcotics is okay in every sense. So then, etc. Jeremy finishes, he says, leftism, rightism is as essential to our essence as libertarianism versus authoritarianism. Libertarians are left or right, and left libertarians are almost as much a threat to everything beautiful and good as the socialists are. Wolves in sheep clothing, essentially. So, what are your thoughts there?
It's all true.
Right.
I
So
would
what has
I would rather
formed?
have Biden as president.
You'd rather have Biden as president than Chase
Yeah.
Oliver?
Yeah.
At least that would hasten the end of it all.
Because
And
with Biden, we can at least laugh at it and say this is
yes,
ridiculous.
yes. And
A ch-
there's something about identity too, right? That if Chase Oliver by some demonic work is elevated to the presidency and continues to identify as a libertarian,
exactly.
then
It doesn't exist anymore.
yes, right. Well, I suppose libertarianism in its purest and thinnest nature would exist. It would just be underground.
Right.
So, yeah, we'd be the way that Code Pink exists in the Democratic Party to this day. The last of the truly anti-war element within the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Chase Oliver and Mike Dermott. By the way, not the campaign is off to a Joe Jorgensen type of beginning. Mike Dermott started tweeting about how everyone's basically anti-gay if you don't support us. And then did an interview with some cuck media person with Chase there saying Chase doesn't have to answer that question. Like that. And then Mike Dermott, someone pointed out in his earliest tweets, he had misspelled the word libertarian. It says libertan. To which he responded, "It's an error. It'll be corrected by 2:30 a.m. tonight." He still hasn't corrected it. How about the fact that it takes 2 seconds to go and change an error in your profile on Twitter, and he can't figure out how to do that? So you have openly gay, open borders, left libertarian who weaseled his way through a variety of underhanded and sinister backhand, backroom deals into the nomination with a boomer ex-cop whose life and example, his life prior to becoming a semi-prominent libertarian figure, was as a cop who, again, I don't know if you saw this today, but Scotty Scheffler, the famous golfer, when he got arrested during the PGA Championship last week, all the charges were dropped. So I kept thinking that didn't post it yet, but I kept thinking that of some sort of tweet where I'd have to say, "Oh, Mike Termott would have definitely stopped Scotty Scheffler if he was a Mexican." So,
Right.
uh, by the wry smile, I think that would be a good tweet,
Be
according to
okay.
Charlie Westerman.
Be okay.
It'd be okay. See,
Well, now it's really interesting because we were talking a little bit about this earlier. It's so hard for people to keep up, and it's so similar to what's going on in the church.
yes, it's weird. There's just an immense amount of resonance, right? So we I I'm still comfortable identifying as a libertarian, of course, small L, but I'm throwing in the towel on any consideration I had for. I think what Michael Heise and Angela McCardle, who by the way, Angela won to be to continue to be the head of the LP, the chairperson of the LP, but the Mises Caucus has failed. Uh, there's no two ways about it. I mean, they could trot out all of these smaller victories. I think there was an episode. Do you remember when we had what's her face on from Louisiana, the crazy libertarian girl that was taking on all of the Mises people, including Michael Heise? What was her
She
name?
was she right?
I That's what I'm starting to consider.
Oh my
What?
gosh. I think she might have been right.
Yeah. And remember, we were talking. Of course, we were thinking that because I unfollowed her because I think she's a little bit crazy, and then there was
Kalina.
all that. What's that?
Kalina.
Oh, Kalina George. Yeah, we were talking about when we had Kalina George on, and she was in this battle with the Mises Caucus people, including Clint. She was on Clint's show. I think it was a show or it was just an open YouTube live or whatever, and she wasn't able to express adequately what her legitimate points of contention were. But and I commented at the time that neither of them looked good because Clint was just really in a very animated and salty and defiant, had a very defiant and dismissive type of tone. But he should have taken those suggestions seriously. And my critique was that they did this whole let's win small races and decentralized revolution. Well, no one cares if you got a libertarian in this, you know, I don't know, Public Works Council in Golden, Colorado. It just doesn't move the dial. It doesn't move the dial. So yes, I could say, who is it? Patrick Moynihan always said that all politics is local. Not so much anymore, especially when we're talking about major movements that have to be transformative. And that, by the way, we don't have time. The country's on the path to perdition. It's already there in many ways. So when you're falling further into the depths of shale and you're going down the road of utter self-destruction, and it's the speed of which, along with the national debt and crime and all of the issues that plague the country, is just further intensifying. The speed is increasing. You can't just say, well, let's build from the ground up and let's pick off the, Juneau, Alaska city council seat that's remained open for 4 years. No one cares about that.
Right.
It just doesn't move the dial. So that's just a major strategic flaw. It's in many ways keeping with elements of libertarian philosophy of how you build a movement, a populist one at that. But I, in the age of Trump too, Charlie, in the age of Trump, the idea of a grassroots, decentralized movement, even I think to over all of the lauds and accolades that I give to Michael Rectenwald, who was the Mises Caucus nominee, who lost and fell into second place, a lot of it because of these backroom dealing and shenanigans that took place among these left libertarians. Um, Still, he talked about the decentralized revolution. Dude, you got to take the bull by the horns. If you're forced and locked into a saddle, right, and the horse is running toward the cliff at greater speed, you got to figure out how to kill the horse. You can't be worried about thinking, oh, maybe there's some means by which the smaller ponies can come and save me.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Maybe I could divert the horse's nose a little bit to direct me in another fashion. No, it's crazed. It's obviously spooked, and it's leading toward your destruction. And you're locked on that horse. You gotta pull the horse's reins first.
Yeah. That's a good analogy.
It sounds a little like Plato's charioteers. So those of you who know your
Mm.
ancient Greek philosophy, you'll hear some resonance there, connection.
Kalina. I totally forgot about
I forgot
Kalina.
about forgive me, Kalina. And we should mention, of course, that to this day, she has the most viewed episode. So
Well, on the video.
our followers don't lack superficiality.
Right.
I still got the most comments on that episode.
Yeah.
Not about our content. We should reach out to her again.
She's going off on Planned Parenthood.
Is she good? Well, we should definitely try to reach out to her again. But she's probably smarting like, look at this.
They really did. I think she might be pro. I don't know. I can't really tell. I'll look at it later. She's doing a lot of stuff on RFK. I can't really tell if it's good or bad yet.
Like pro RFK or bad or RFK is no good. I would think that if she's going off on Planned Parenthood.
So RFK and late term abortion.
Oh yeah, right. Because now he's backtracking. He said in an interview with who was it, Sage Steele, that basically all abortions up to birth are legitimate, should be protected. And then well, I don't know if you saw Alex Stein confronted RFK Jr. at the LNC. And of course, RFK ran from Primetime 99. Yeah, on the abortion issue. So we can identify still. Do you feel comfortable identifying still as small L libertarian, or do we just drop libertarian altogether and just say ANCAP? Because I'm already finding I'm stumbling over. Even prior to the Chase Oliver defeat of the Mises Caucus and Rectenwald and and all the guys that we love and support, like Clint and Dave. Um, I was already tripping over, you know, that I'm a libertarian. I think I say that more so people, because the general public is a little bit more
That's
aware
the
of
thing.
that.
I do think that there's a big element in it, depending on who you're talking to.
Correct. Could I analogously, it's very similar to when I say I'm an Orthodox Catholic,
Yes.
which is a better descriptor for what I am than just Catholic. You see? So what I mean by that, I'm literally from the Greek translation, I'm a right praising Catholic. I follow the church's teaching and clarification and explanation of Sacra Doctrina as the
Yeah,
apostles had
I'll say
established
like
it.
practicing Catholic.
Yes. Okay. But someone could be a left practicing Catholic because they attend the sacraments, but they also want to see.
But yeah, it's not as descriptive.
Sure.
But
But when I say Orthodox,
the fact that you have to add something in there instead
correct,
of
correct. Or I'll say also, but this puts people off to the same degree of when I say I'm an anarcho-capitalist, because people don't like that word anarchism, or being in favor of anarchy, because they've been conditioned, whether it be through their government schools or through culture, to just think anarchy is craziness. It's the same people that taught you that the Wild West is really the Wild West as it developed because there was no government institution out there regulating people's lives. It's amazing that government schools are the ones that in your history class characterize the Wild West as such. And yet, where there is a preponderance and an inescapable presence of government, like on the southwest side of Chicago on Memorial Day weekends, they talk about this past weekend where, well, only 41 got shot, or only 41 died, I think. There were 41 dead, from my recollection.
really?
Is that right? Or is it 41
No,
shot?
I don't think so. Usually
Take a
that's
look.
like the shot number. I'll be shocked if
Is it 41 shot? I thought there were more that were injured because they always give the killed,
yeah,
injured.
41 shot.
Okay, so 41 shot. How many died? Do we know?
Nine. At least
Nine
nine.
died. Okay, so you got 9 dead, 41 shot. And what does the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, do? Say, look, it's down from last year. We're making progress. It's down from last year. Less people died in Kharkiv in the Ukraine-Russia war over the weekend, I think. So let's dispense with this whole so where there's a preponderance of government, where it's inescapable, and government is just seeps its darkness into every sinew of culture here, correct? Corrupting everything that would be alive and well without it. Sure enough, that's not wild. That's not anarchy, right? So, but going back to the whole naming or identification thing, I also don't want to fall into the trap of feeling like a 14-year-old, always worried about how am I identifying?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking
Who am
too.
I projecting to the world and trying to figure out, well, what am I? You know? It, that's cringe. And it's sophomoric. So what do you I my my preference, I think, going forward, I would offer going forward is just be very upfront. When I say I'm an anarcho-capitalist first, I'll say, by the way, that's just someone who detests government with all the fire of being because it's a usurpative institution and you should be rid of it because you want to be free.
Yeah, that's extremely autistic.
That's autistic.
Extremely. Yeah.
Okay. So how do I shorten that up?
Well, that's
I'm
what
an
we're trying to figure out
anarcho-capitalist
right
because I
now.
believe you should be able to determine the course of your life as opposed to others.
Autist.
All right. I'm an anarcho-capitalist because I want to
See,
burn down the
if it's
government
longer
and
than
spit and piss on its ashes.
yeah, if
What?
it's longer than a sentence, it's like
I'm an anarcho-capitalist because I hate archons and I love capitalists. They don't know what an archon is.
right.
Okay. I guess we'll have to work on it. But let me get your sense of this. Do you feel like you should just say when people ask you where are you politically or where you're trying to express things either on this podcast in our preferred venue of political and social and economic and history and all things discursive, do you say I'm an anarcho-capitalist, or do you want to just keep going? I'm a small L libertarian.
Depends who you're talking to. Depends who
Okay.
you're talking to.
All right. So let's say we're
There
talking.
is a generational gap here. There is a generation difference here.
Okay.
I would probably not say ANCAP to someone above 40.
Uh-oh. Okay. So here's where James Delingpole would go. Your former pupil. He's a bit of a normie, isn't he?
They don't understand it.
True.
And I don't feel like explaining it. Like, I'm not going to waste my time
I
being
don't feel
like,
like explaining it.
yeah, like the whole like boomer education thing, I don't really need to get into.
I get it. It doesn't have to, aside from the boomers, because I think,
Everyone above 40 is a boomer. Sorry about that.
okay, everybody above 40 is a boomer. So if everybody above 40 is a boomer, how do you, even if it's to someone in your own age group,
I could say ANCAP to someone my age.
okay. So it just depends on the
It's a
audience.
more conservative, more used to extremism generation than those prior.
Is there still an almost unassailable, like, uh, how would I describe it? Recoiling, like just a deep sense of when someone says they're a conservative in your age group?
I haven't heard that in a while.
Okay. So yeah, I, I would argue that saying you're an ANCAP is much easier than saying you're a conservative
I don't think
across the
people,
age groups.
yeah, I mean, most people would just be like, I'm definitely not woke. Like the conservatives that
Mm,
I know, they just say like, yeah, I'm not like with the woke stuff.
okay. But they're with the neocon stuff.
I think a lot of them aren't actually. I think
Okay,
more of
that's
them
good.
are figuring out how libertarian they actually are.
Okay. But you're using the word libertarian again.
Small L.
Okay. All right.
Some people just
It's
aren't.
not so
Some
it's
people
not
aren't.
autistic.
There. That's the thing. There still is some gap between neocon and ANCAP. Like there's still a lot of room that you have to go
Well, it should
from
be
there.
everything. Well, wait, say that again.
There's a large gap between neocon and ANCAP. So there's people
Not in
that
terms of you, obviously you're not talking about policy here. You're just talking about reception of the terms.
both.
What do you mean there's a large, obviously
There's a big
there's
difference
a,
between neocon and ANCAP, but there's still a lot of room in between. So you can be not a neo. You just said, but they're with the neocons, and I would say no. They
oh,
can not be with the neocons and not be with ANCAPs at the same time.
I see. Okay. That makes more sense. I thought you were just saying what in terms of policy is obviously true that there's differences between neoconservatism and anarcho-capitalists. You'd be at
Yeah.
opposite sides of the political spectrum. Okay. Uh, so how does this move into Blessed Carlo Acutis?
Ooh, it doesn't really.
It does. And here's why. We're talking about again identifying
Yeah, you're right.
as we do. We're I own the rights to the website and Cap Catholic. We are anarcho-capitalist Catholics or Catholic anarcho-capitalists, if you prefer and you're worried about primacy in terms of descriptors. So what happens? It is troubling when institutions are taken over that are nominally and by their nomenclature supposed to be the institutional representations and the quickest connection to a faith, a religion, an identity, a social order, philosophy, ideology. And they're run by people who have been shoved in lockers, rightfully shoved in lockers. And then they spend the rest of their lives trying to punish anyone who they identify as either having shoved them in a locker or would have sided with them being shoved into the locker. this is what I would argue is going on within both the Libertarian Party and Catholicism. You have this vestige, and it is truly a vestigial organ of people who want to deconstruct and break down and have a really core and intrinsic hatred for the core philosophies, ideas, notions, principles of, in one case, libertarianism, in the other case, Catholicism, who want to hang on and glom on for whatever reason, either to carry out their fantasies of punishing the people who shove them in the lockers, or because they have no other way to identify than as contrarians within both movements or within both areas. So we have, and by the way, the difference being is, you might say, well, why would you identify as a Catholic anymore? Well, because I don't have any consideration to believe that the Libertarian Party has received divine inspiration
Yeah.
as the conduit for salvation created by God himself as the mechanism of expiation for our sins and our sanctification and deification.
That's another thing.
Yeah.
I don't think you can have an effective political movement without a religious backing anymore.
You can't have an effective political. Oh, I see. At least there has to be an admission that all too often, particularly for yes, the Communist Party, it's quite obvious. Their politics is their religion. It is
Exactly. Yeah.
cultish. It is cultic in its, well, and Yuri Shleshkin, who wrote that great book, The House of Government, about the Russian Revolution and what transpired there, he goes through all these chapters amid the actual historical datum that he and analysis that he provides, just talking about the nature of Marxism and then later Leninism and Stalinism as an axiomatic political religion, which it's a fascinating explanation. And I encourage people to read that book. It's voluminous, but it's well worth the read. So yes, it's even, and to be sure, whenever you have a tatus or status, the state is their god, to be sure. There's democracy is their god because it's through the prayers, i.e., votes and will of the general will of the people, that the state responds, and then everyone else, whether they are adherents to it or not, must obey. That's a religious pietistic etatism, to be sure. So I guess the point being here is that you have people who are shoved in lockers who, in the case of Catholicism, as opposed to libertarianism, have a problem with things that they should celebrate. And news this week came out earlier in the week that Pope Francis, by the way, on the heels of doing that 60 Minutes interview, which was 90% disastrous, but then 10% the Holy Spirit intervened and said, let me handle this one question on women's ordination. And he just said, when Nora
No.
O'Donnell gave him, he just said, no. And a quite definitive no, especially from the waffling Francis.
Yeah. Is he based?
No, he's, give me a
They're
break.
starting to say he's
He's a
based.
Peronist. So I wouldn't doubt for a moment that, just as Peron did in Argentina and other Peronists as they've come to power, whether they be in Argentina, the United States, or Uruguay, or wherever they are, is that he says no in this fashion, and then we're going to get hit with, well, there's going to be sort of female deacons coming, right?
They're starting to say he's based. They're starting to say he's got some
Yeah. I think, again, that's very wishful thinking.
mistranslating.
I was just reading Eric Sammons, whose column, he's the editor of Crisis Magazine, a faithful Catholic to be sure, but he's excoriating Archbishop Vigano for implying that, and it wasn't even a direct assertion, but that Francis is a homosexual or has homosexual tendencies himself. I've said as much. So if Eric Sammons has a point of contention, he actually told Archbishop Vigano to shut the hell up or something like that, or shut your mouth. You know, I tweeted back, I said, why don't you take it easy? You know, talking to Archbishop Vigano or that, like that. Someone who is an actually based bishop, and an Orthodox, I'll use the word Orthodox again, bishop. But let's go back to Carlo Acutis. So word came out that Acutis, who, do you want to, why don't you bring up just the Wikipedia biography? Because not everybody's aware of
I can
who
give
this.
this story.
Yeah, go ahead. So,
Blessed Carlo, he was this young Italian boy, came from a
mhm.
wealthy family. From an early age, just a very saintly figure.
Even
He's
though his parents were irreligious.
exactly
Hmm.
he wasn't really raised within the church, but just grew to love the faith. He
He's Catholic Beethoven, or he's Catholic Mozart, from my perspective. You know the story about how Mozart never took a lesson. He just sat down and started playing the piano. He knew how to
yeah
play intuitively.
yeah
Carlo Acutis knew who his Lord Savior was, and the mystical dynamics of being in relationship with him from the earliest onset. He didn't need catechesis. He didn't need instruction. Now, that's not to say that he didn't benefit from it or that he didn't add to it for others through his holy example, but he was a prodigy. He's a Catholic prodigy.
yes, and we have a shrine at St. Mary's of him, and he's been an inspiration to the catechism classes that we teach. Father Tom always makes sure we make it a point that being a saint is not reserved for adults, that
Mm,
there we have actual videos of Blessed Carlo in his life.
yes.
And he unfortunately died of leukemia at
Hmm.
age 15, I believe, in either 2006 or 2004.
Right there.
So about 20 years ago. And he's was referred to as Blessed Carlo, and he's going to be canonized into the church as a saint, the patron saint of the internet. And the reason he's going to be the patron saint of the internet is because he made a website. And I don't think we should understate how difficult this is. This kid taught himself how to code at like age 13, multiple programming languages,
At a
because
time
he
in which you couldn't just go
exactly
on Masterclass and get a
20 years
tutorial
ago
on it.
when you couldn't just go on Teachable or
Yeah.
School or
Or
YouTube
yeah. Or
to just
Udemy.
pick this stuff up.
Hmm.
He probably had to go to libraries and learn
Right.
all of this stuff. And the reason he wanted to make a website is because he wanted to document Eucharistic miracles all over the world, and also some other stuff related to the faith. But
So
his
this should
website,
be so Pope Francis recognizing a miracle associated with Blessed Carlo, deemed as connected to intercessory prayer, that he was called upon to intercede on behalf of individuals in a supernatural way so as to bring about healing or reconciliation, whatever it was. I don't even know the nature of the miracle that was recognized, has moved him toward sainthood. And it's speculated that by the end of 2025, there will be the canonization of the first third millennial saint. Or not third, yeah, third millennial saint, right? So, I mean, think about that. That's a momentous thing. And given his holy example, albeit he was 15, we've had young saints much younger than that.
mhm.
This should be an occasion for a great celebration within the church, should it not? Especially if you come to understand the transformative impact that this boy had on anyone who was relatively close to him. But it wasn't.
I don't know. I think people are still
But
celebrating it, but
you're
the
right.
fact that
The normal, because again, the the good Catholics, it's a weird dynamic, especially in the age of social media, wherein you have the shit posters who become very vocal, but their energy dies out very quickly. And then the truth sayers follow, and the righteous kind of follow. And thankfully, in the case of really important subject matters like this that pertain to matters Catholic and salvific, the good eventually mutes the bad, in my opinion. So I was wrong to say that it wasn't a cause for celebration, and it isn't among people, but there was for a moment a sour taste that was left in my mouth because of the presence of these shit posters who want to say that, well, it's sort of easy. I think, well, how easy is it for this to happen? And in part, a lot of it was due to early artistic renderings like this one, which is just bad. It's just bad art. It lacks the nuance and subtle symbolism that ought to be contained in hagiographical iconography, often what is the best of the church's art. This is just looks bad, right? It's a rendering that is just artistically poor. With his hair looks like it was in a hairnet, you know. So this is this is bad. So our friend Trevor at Tridentine Brewing just pointed out that, look, a lot of the angst against having a lot of angst about, you know, Carlo becoming elevated to the status of saint is a conflation of some of the earliest artistic renderings that are cringe and just not that good. So to the rescue came Beritus Catholic.
Well, some people had an issue with the laptop. A lot of people have an issue with him being shown with a laptop
Oh, and
and
yeah, and
technology.
right, that's another point that that Trevor makes here. He says if he was a prolific writer from 200 years ago, he'd be depicted with a pen and a book. Instead, he has a laptop because that's how he spread Eucharistic devotion. This isn't a problem. Uh, but what I'm glad you mentioned about this, whether it's these awkward renderings or just the natural inclusion of a laptop, which was his method, the vehicle by which he evangelized and preached God's miracles revolving around the Eucharist, which is the source and summit of our faith. There's nothing wrong with it. It comes from this, I'll use the word rigoristic legalism. It's a type of Jansenism that is reflected of the puritanical and Calvinistic influence, especially in the American church, but in the Western church. And this rigorism, this legalism within the church, and a preference to a kind of tendency, and I would say it's a real weakness, to detest things that are new just because they're new. That is when Francis, here's, I'm going to say something not complimentary, but I'll try to nuance some of Francis's sentiment into the direction where it ought to be focused. Anyone who just says anything that's old and pre-Vatican is good, and everything that's post 1965 is bad. This is an arbitrary and unfounded and kind of asinine distinction. Yeah, it's that it emerges from there's no difference between that and the Vietnam protester, anti-war protester, who, although on the right side of history, and I mean that in the real sense of that term, would say the famous phrase from the late 60s and early 70s was trust no one over 30. Trust no one over 30. But you just did that with everyone over 40 is a boomer. So I guess you're in that category. No, I'm just kidding, Charlie. But do you see my point here?
Yeah.
It's just get beyond this rigoristic Calvinism and look to the beauty of a boy who was resplendent with God's grace and transformed people's lives as a result of it and glorified God as being utterly present, transcendently present in the Eucharist. fully God, present there, full divinity, full humanity, right there as you receive his body and blood. So let's bring up the Beritus rendering. There we are. Now that is powerful, right? Because it's subtle and there's beauty in the way his hair looks and his demeanor and facial expression. It's not artificial. And he's wearing this white cloak that, although he wasn't religious, he's donned a garb that looks like very much like a habit, like the habit of a preacher. It looks very Dominican. I don't know if Beritus wanted it that way, but man, this was his method of preaching to the world. God's love, God's metanoia call to repentance, his agape for people. And he did so well, Carlo did. And then in his suffering, he proved with leukemia as his type of stigmata that his suffering was redemptive. He offered, by the way, this is a 13 and 14-year-old boy who receives a diagnosis of leukemia. He says, I offer up my suffering for the sufferings of the church. To me, that's a miracle in and of itself. Where does he get that sagacity? That's supernatural wisdom. So I've long loved and admired Carlo Acutis. I've begged for his intercession as a servant of God and then a blessed as he's ascended up the ladder toward official recognition as a saint. And I'll be all the more devoted to him when that glorious day comes, when hopefully the next pope canonizes him.
Do you want to talk about a town that Blessed Carlo hasn't reached yet?
Yeah. Although I will state one more liaison and tie-in, a kind of sequitur to going from a discussion about the plague of Calvinism on the church and this rigorism, and then even Oak Park. People might wonder, well, where does this come from? This fringe desire among Catholics, and I would argue they're Catholic largely in name only. Where does this come from? And it comes from the comfort of having and applying burdens and unassailably high standards for people to reach for the purpose of deeming them as holy and good, but their standards are never met by the standard setters. That's what's so pharisaical about it. There was an attraction to being a Pharisee. Obviously, there were a lot of them, and they were in authority and enough power to put God on a cross. So there was obviously an allure. Jesus says, of course, don't be like the Pharisees over and over again. Woe to you, Pharisees. Correct? So they banty about the street in sackcloth and ashes or what have you, following the law and lording it over the people. Same thing here. We just have a lot of Catholic Pharisees, and they would just wish they would just. My first wish for them is to engage in a massive conversion and repentance, and the second, if they hold fast to their Pharisaical notions, just get out, because this boy should be celebrated. We should love honoring him. Okay, so back to Oak Park again. Virtue signaling. Let's get into it.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
It's a bit of a lame week. I think Memorial Day weekend, for whatever reason, was. We still got some funny stories. Don't have to get that wrong.
Yeah.
This says thief steals gun bulldog from Oak Park apartment.
I'm sorry for the poor bulldog, but
Someone broke into an Oak Park residence on the 500 block of South Ridgeland Avenue between May 23rd and May 24th. The person removed the air conditioning unit from the window to break in. The individual then ransacked the apartment and stole a Sony PlayStation 5, a Cartier watch, a handgun, and a cream-colored French bulldog. The estimated loss is $29,700.
Great watchdog, the French bulldog.
How much of that was the dog? How much did they value the dog at?
Right. I mean, he shouldn't be valued that highly if he allowed this thief to just get off with him and the rest of the stuff.
Around May 23rd, someone broke into an Oak Park residence safe and stole an 18-karat engagement ring and an 18-karat white gold band. The incident, which occurred on the 900 block of North Lombard Avenue, resulted in an estimated loss of $10,000. Wow. There's a lot of break-ins. My goodness. Between May 22nd and May 23rd, someone broke into the BP gas station at 6119 North Avenue. The person used a brick to break the window pane and get inside the building. The person then tried to break into the cash register with the brick, but did not succeed. The person then stole food items. The estimated loss and damage are $2,000. So I wonder how much of that's the window versus the food. Rental prices up in busy Oak Park real estate season. People are still moving here, Gary. They don't listen to Meanwhile in Oak Park. The local real estate market has been booming this spring, with houses and condos selling in days at or above asking price. Inventory rates remain low as fewer sellers enter the market, whether that's due to high interest rates or an inability to find something to move into. A similar inventory shortage is playing out in the local rental market. Quote, "What I've been seeing this spring is that we're not seeing the number of listings we usually have," said Michael Stewart, Associate Director of the Oak Park Regional Housing Center. More building owners and managers are saying they have no openings. The OPRHC is a nonprofit organization that works to connect housing seekers and providers throughout the Chicago, area. That's not a sentence. And providers throughout the Chicago, area, but with a focus on West Cook County communities. Building owners and managers register for free with the OPRHC to provide local listings, and apartment seekers register with the OPRHC to get help finding a rental. Stewart said that helping people find rentals is what the Housing Center has been doing for 50 years. This year, more than other years, he said the market is tighter with fewer local listings. He's hearing from current tenants that they don't want to give up their leases because the prices they see for new leases are more expensive than what they're paying. Property owner and managers are telling him that they are facing increased costs in their property taxes and for utilities. Stewart said that local rent often includes the price of water and heat, so when those prices go up, so does the rent. Yeah, getting rid of those gas appliances by year 2030 isn't gonna make rent any less expensive. Property owners say they feel the need to pass on their increased costs through rent increases, but Stewart said that can be hard for established tenants. He's heard from tenants that rent prices are increasing more than normal. Quote, "I recommend to our owners that they do small conservative increases every year rather than one large increase because that's easier for the tenants. Tenants can budget for it and typically afford that," he said. Tenants feel offended by and can't afford the big jumps. How about you just lower the property taxes? You're muted. I can't hear you. Stewart works with building owners and managers to let them know what apartment seekers are looking for in a rental. For instance, a lot of renters today have pets, so it can be beneficial to have pet-friendly options. Quote, "I also tell building owners and managers that it's good to have a range of prices within a building You get a good mix of people and products, and you can also weather different economic climates better. As for apartment seekers, Stuart said, there's the wish list and then there's the reality list. We help everyone we come in contact with, even if they don't get exactly what they want. We can give everyone a little bit of hope in the process. Stuart said that there are two big markets in Oak Park rentals, the new construction buildings and the vintage apartment buildings. Quote, I think it's great that we have that variety in Oak Park. The new construction buildings often feature the latest finishes and amenities with a higher price rent to match, while the vintage buildings have been updated and can offer great square footage, but without the most modern bells and whistles. Oak Park's newest rental building to hit the market, Pleasant Street's The Porter, is advertised in online rental searches as starting at $15.27 per month for a studio and up to $74.25 per month for a 3-bedroom rental. I can't hear you.
Sorry, I had mute on. $7,500
For 3-bedroom?
for 3 bedrooms. 7,500. The Porter.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
And it's Oak Park. It's not like
Downtown
it's not like a
Chicago.
high rise. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
You got to look on, you got to see the robbery at Pleasant Street. You got to see your neighbor getting their bulldog stolen. Stewart said the higher rents of new buildings can skew people's perceptions of the average rent in Oak Park. But when you factor in the vintage rentals, Oak Park is still an affordable place to live in the Chicago area.
No, it's not. Go ahead.
While the data on rent prices changes weekly, Stewart said that a vintage 1-bedroom apartment in Oak Park might run $1,100 to $1,400 and up, and a 2-bedroom unit might be priced at $1,600 to $1,900 and up.
Well, maybe Stuart's right because I thought those are pretty reasonable prices, to tell you the truth. Although, for those people who locked in 2.5%, 3% mortgages from 5 or 6 years ago, that's what you're paying for a house. So, and probably less. So, I guess that's still on the pricey end given current economic conditions.
The moral of the story is there are more affordable listings out there. Stewart said that all buildings in Oak Park are welcome to list with the housing center for free, and any apartment seeker is welcome to use the housing center services. The housing center typically works with those who can pay market rate, but if an apartment seeker has a subsidy, they can also work with the staff at the housing center. Stewart said the OPRHC offers services and education for those in the rental market. Quote, within our umbrella, we can help you get counseling to repair your credit. We can help you understand what building managers are looking for. We can go over the total cost of rentals so that you know what salary would be needed to afford the rental. Anyone looking for an apartment is welcome to call or come into the OPRHC at 1041 South Boulevard or register with liveinoakpark.com.
Poor bastards. That is.
That's the segment. That's the episode.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
Ooh. That I feel relieved. That was cathartic for me, that entire episode.
I really like talking about Blessed Carlo. I hope it wasn't too difficult for people who aren't as deep in this as we are. This is the rabbit hole. The matrix.
Yes.
There's a lot of layers, man.
The core ideas of libertarianism and, of course, the salvific tenets of Catholicism are worth fighting for. The institutions outside of the institutional church that surround the libertarian sphere just, yeah.
Last election, I didn't even know who Michael Malice was. And now this rabbit hole just, there's so many different characters and forces and infighting.
it's weird. It's funny that you brought up Malice because I remember years ago, someone who was interviewing him, and I think it was someone prominent. So I don't know if it was Alex Jones or something like that, or but they had said, "Well, you're a libertarian." He goes, "I'm not a libertarian," and he went on to explain that he's an anarcho-capitalist. And so it can be done. You just have to have the genius of Michael Malice, or as Owen Benjamin calls him, Mikey Malice.
Did you see the tweet he had towards Dave Smith?
Yeah, it was both tongue in cheek and a poke, right?
Yeah.
Do
Congrats,
you
Dave
remember what it
Smith.
said?
The Libertarian Party is now part of the problem.
Yes, I did see that. Mm-hmm. It is. I wonder if I wonder how Dave's feeling. I hope that the next part of the problem episodes are as cathartic for him and as
Have they come out yet?
no, as remedial for him as like a therapy session as this one was for me. Because he did so much work, and you could do the whole well, you should have run for president thing, and you would have won the nomination, and you would have moved the ball in ways that maybe we couldn't even fathom at this point. But he didn't. But in every other way, he was he was the energy behind the takeover of the party, and everyone else just allowed the sinister elements to take it away. So at this point, I would almost throw my I hope that he just throws his hand up in the air and looks for a different solution. I mean,
Yeah.
after all, the reason that he didn't run was because, in part, what he does is transmit and convey and distill the beauty of libertarian thought and Austrian economics and free markets to an ever increasing mass audience.
Yeah.
That's in part why he wanted to stick with it. So just do that. The partisan politics thing, that's just not a vehicle that's open to us. They keep you get behind the wheel, and then like a deranged driving instructor, they just grab the wheel, and the progressive elements and the classical liberal factions or whatever they call themselves just throw the car, they grab the steering wheel away from the student driver or the Mises caucus and throw it right into an embankment. So just let them keep throwing it into an embankment. And this ticket is going to get 0.5%, 1% of the vote.
See. All right, everyone.
Well, until next time, peace. God bless.
Take care.